I'm Mark.
And I'm Josh.
And this is a very special episode of Alter Ego Comics TV, a 2012 year in review. And right now we're going to talk about our top 10 comic book writers of 2012. And the writing in comics this year was just outstanding. It was really tough to come up with a list of just 10. And it's one of the reasons that I really believe that we're in a new golden age of comic books. The comics as a complete package are so good, and the writing is on par with the best on television, the best in movies, the best in novels. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of the people that work in those other mediums come over to comic books and try it because they know it's going to be fun. And they're jealous of the other people that are finding success. And one of those people leads off our list here, and these are in no particular order. Brian K. Vaughn is on our list of the top comic book writers of this year, and he's only writing one comic book, and that's not a bad thing. You know, there was a time when comic book writers would write 5, 6, 8, 10, looking at you, Stanley, comic books a month, but Vaughn has firmly entrenched himself in the world of Hollywood with being a writer on the TV show Lost and developing movies and doing other things, but his first love is still comics, and that's one of the reasons why he returned to comics with Saga this year. Vaughn is also a big proponent of the direct market of retailers. There was a period when Amazon actually didn't offer his first collected edition of Saga because they objected to the content, or they had people objecting to the content. They actually pulled it and they weren't selling it. And Brian posted, well, of course you can still find this at the best place to buy comics, your local comic book store. So thank you for that, Mr. Vaughn. Vaughn has kind of, I don't want to say single-handedly, but he's definitely leading the way at Image Comics as far as getting people. Saga is kind of like a gateway drug, I think. It's a drug of some kind, but we had people pick up Saga. We actually, at our store, we offered a money-back guarantee, actually a more than your money-back guarantee, where if someone bought issue 1 and they didn't like it, they could return it for more than they actually paid for it in store credit. And we sold Batman-like numbers on Saga #1 and had 2 people return it. And I don't know who you are. I don't want to know who you are. But we only had 2 people return it. And again, we sold Saga #1 in numbers pretty darn close to what we sell of Batman monthly. And we've had a large number of those people stick with it. But the cool thing about it is that we had people branch off and try other creator-owned books. Books from Image, books from Dark Horse, Vertigo books, things other than DC and Marvel. And that's not to say that we don't love superheroes, because we do. I'm a diehard, superhero fan. But creator-owned comics are a completely different animal. These are people that are putting their livelihood on the line, and they're making a stand, and they're saying, I want to control these characters. I want to see what happens to them myself. I don't want to, I don't want another Howard the Duck. I don't want to license my characters away for something and not get any compensation down the road. I want to say in what happens and the future of these things. So Vaughn has a very consistent track record. He's the writer of Why the Last Man, the writer of Ex Machina, and Runaways over at Marvel, and all 3 of those are outstanding. Pride of Baghdad, his original graphic novel from Vertigo, is a must-read, and now he's got Saga going on, and we love it.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out that he's only writing 1 book. That's 7 issues he put out in 2012, but I think that's one of the reasons his catalog is so awesome, is he's perfectly willing to say no. Brian K. Vaughn doesn't need to write your fill-in issue of Plastic Man or whatever. Brian K. Vaughn will do the stories he wants to do, and that's why his quality is consistently strong. And somebody else who's been consistently knocking it out of the park and also doing some great work at Image is Jonathan Hickman. You may know him from his creator-owned books like Red Wing or Nightly News or Nova Roma?
Pax Romana.
You may also
right
know him. It is literally right there. You may also know him from his work revitalizing in an amazing way the Fantastic Four and FF, and he's so good. It's an interesting balance he strikes. His most popular book in the store at the moment is probably Manhattan Projects, although with the new Marvel Now books he's writing, it could go either way. But he strikes just the right balance of really science fiction. There are very few people writing true, pure science fiction books in comics now, and Hickman is one of them, and he's maybe the best of them. His books have a respect for history, they have an understanding of complex things, and they don't dumb down. They don't assume that you're not as smart as he is. He just lays it out there, and if you have to go Wikipedia, that's what you do to follow the book. And they make you want to follow him. He has engaging characters. He takes people like FDR and makes them into heads in jars predicting the future in ticker tape. And it's astounding, the sort of things he comes up with. There's really nobody else doing the sort of edgy work that he does in that part of the comics world.
And somebody who has, as you said, his feet planted firmly in mainstream comics as well as indie creator-owned stuff. Yeah. Brian Michael Bendis is on our list this year, and Bendis has really made a name for himself at Marvel Comics over the last 8 to 9 to 10, I think it's 8 years, where he was Mr. Avengers. He was basically given free reign to write the Avengers books, and 90% of the time he did a great job. I think Marvel got a little greedy a little bit with Avengers / New Avengers /
Dark Avengers,
Secret Avengers, all these other Avengers. But Bendis really only wrote 2 of them. He's been considered one of the architects over at Marvel. But when you cut down to the meat of it, he is a great writer. He writes incredible dialogue. He writes engaging characters. He knows these characters. He's given them unique voices. He took a character like Luke Cage, Power Man, who was languishing away in obscurity, and arguably made him an A-list character at Marvel, and gave him a unique voice that I think if we ever see a Power Man or Luke Cage on television or movies, it's going to have Bendis' voice, not his actual voice, but
it'll work.
He will sound like he was written in the Bendis Avengers books. He was involved with Avengers vs. X-Men this year and wrote some of the really powerful issues there. And right now he's writing All New X-Men, and he's going to be writing Uncanny X-Men over at Marvel. And All New X-Men, I am so excited about this book. There are only 2 issues have come out so far. By the time you see this, there will be more than 2 issues. But it's time travel. It's got the original X-Men. It's dealing with present-day issues. And now Bendis is getting a chance to play in the X-Men universe and will become Mr. X-Men instead of Mr. Avengers. So on top of that, he's writing the best book for young readers, mainstream book for young readers, and that's Ultimate Comics Spider-Man. Introduce the character of Miles Morales, which is a very 21st century way of looking at the character of Spider-Man. This is a middle school kid who's half black, half Latino. He lives in New York City. He idolized, the other Spider-Man, the other Ultimate Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and all of a sudden he has these powers and abilities. And I don't want to give everything away, but he is one of the most unique and engaging characters that Marvel has, or at Marvel Comics, in a long time. And this character is going to be around. It's got legs. The Ultimate Comic Spider-Man, the character of Miles Morales, is not a flash in the pan. He's going to be around for a long time, and it's so fun to read this book month in and month out. So again, not only is Bendis writing the characters that many of us have grown up with, he's introducing new characters that a new generation of fans can grow up with too.
Next up, we've got Dan Slott, best known solely almost for writing an amazing run on Amazing Spider-Man, and it's going to be culminating by the end of the year in 700, which we've been told will knock our socks off. And I will say, we got a 9 or 10 panel preview, and I might have teared up a little bit at just some pages from this book. And the reason for that is Slott's respect for the material. He's a huge Marvel fanboy. He knows it better than almost anyone who's not Mark Waid, probably. But Slott's Amazing Spider-Man is
amazing.
Amazing.
Well, I will say, I don't want to have people think that we only think of him with Amazing Spider-Man, because he had an incredible run on She-Hulk about 6 or 7 years ago.
Over like 2 series.
Yes, but it was totally underappreciated.
Oh, yeah.
And you should go back and read these in collected edition or find the back issue someplace, because his work on She-Hulk was great. And we loved his stuff on Mighty Avengers too, when he was doing Mighty. And
actually, yeah,
it wasn't Avengers Academy. It was whatever it was before that.
The Initiative.
Yes, Avengers the Initiative. And it goes back to just Dan Slott being a huge fan of comics, and I'm glad to see that he's, some people aren't happy with the direction he's taking Spider-Man in, but it's fresh, it's new, it's different. Everything can't be happy for Peter Parker all the time. What did I say? I said this about 3 or 4 months ago. I said, I feel like something bad is going to happen, because Peter had this run of good luck, run of good fortune since Slott took over, and I knew that it's the Parker luck. It's going to come back to bite him, and Slott's doing a great job with it. One of the longtime members of the comic writing community, Jeff Johns, makes our list. And there's so many cool things about Jeff Johns. Again, you're dealing with someone that grew up reading comics, someone that's a long time, lifelong. That's it. Lifelong fan of comics. He has advanced up the ladder at DC Comics so that he's chief creative officer now. But so he's heavily involved with the video game side of DC Comics, with the television side of DC Comics. But he still writes 3+ titles a month at DC. So he's writing Justice League, he's writing Aquaman, he's writing Green Lantern. He's heavily involved in the day-to-day of comics. And he wrote Batman Earth 1 this year, which was fantastic. He can't do any wrong. I mean, I hate to say that because one day Jeff Johns will write something I don't want to read. And maybe you won't want to read. But you have to give him credit for being a huge proponent for comic books and one of the best talents out there right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, none of these guys are going to be good forever. I mean, everybody eventually goes the way of Jeff Loeb or other people formerly.
Oh, come on now.
It is what it is.
We don't say mean things.
I'm not being mean. I'm just saying his good stuff now is not as good as it was then. But, I mean, his output this year has made Jeff Johns amazing. And also important... Next up on the list, Scott Snyder, best known for writing American Vampire and Batman, as well as some creator-owned books. Most notably this year, Severed was maybe the best horror book on the stands. Scott Snyder is, I think, the newest creator on our list. He came from relatively nowhere, got Stephen King to co-write the first arc of American Vampire, which let's think about there for a second. This is a guy that was relatively unpublished. He had done some minor things, but he sends a copy to Stephen King, and Stephen King's like, I want in. It's somebody so good that Stephen King needed to work with this guy. And that made big strides in getting people to pick up the first volume of American Vampire, and that brought Snyder to Batman, which brought Batman back to awesome. That's really what Snyder's done with his run last year on Dick Grayson and Detective, and his run this year in the Court of the Owls stuff. Snyder has made Batman relevant in a way that he hasn't been in a little while in the comic universe, and that is his achievement, and that is why he's on our list.
Darwin Cook makes our list for a variety of reasons. He is heavily involved in the Before Watchmen campaign and the Before Watchmen books, writing the Before Watchmen Minutemen book and drawing it, and co-writing Before Watchmen Silk Spectre with Amanda Connor. Darwin Cook brings a level of excellence to every project that he touches, whether it's doing a one-off issue of Jonah Hex or adapting the Parker novels into graphic novels, or taking on something that most people would shy away from, like the Before Watchmen books. He's I hate to say this, but he's like the respected elder of the comic books community. He's not that old, but when we're talking about people like Scott Snyder and Jeff Johns, Darwin Cook has a couple years on these guys. But he, as a writer, he captures that essence of nostalgia. Whether it was Justice League New Frontier or the Parker books, like I mentioned, and especially with Before Watchmen, he's able to capture those moments in history and flesh them out and draw us in and help us relive or make us feel like we were there when these things were going on. And that's why Darwin Cook is one of the top 10 writers of 2012.
Also on our list, maybe a controversial choice, Mr. Steve Niles. Easily, well, maybe not easily, but probably one of the people on the list who sells the fewest copies in the store. Steve Niles is on the list because he's consistent. He works for a number of different publishers. He's always got something new coming out. He bangs out books like crazy. And his most recent work that we're really thrilled with is Lot 13, which has been a cool setup. But creator-owned heroes, the sort of comic magazine, I don't know what it is. It's a weird hybrid.
Anthology, yeah.
With essays and interviews, and it's basically, I don't know, it's an amalgamation of what Wizard was when it was still good, and of a great anthology book like Dark Horse Presents. And it's great. It's creator-owned, as the title would lead you to believe, and it brings a lot of new ideas. Niles is kind of a maverick. He's doing, 30 Days of Night and harder stuff like Criminal Macabre, which is sort of a Hellblazer if it was turned up to 11. And then you've also got him working with people like Bernie Wrightson? Mm-hmm. Yeah, on Frankenstein Alive. And he's kind of everywhere, and he's always good. And sometimes that gets overlooked for people that sell, 200,000 copies of a book a month. Steve Niles doesn't move a lot of copies, but every book he sells is good.
Sticking in that same vein, we've got Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray. We're treating these two people as one because they basically co-write everything together. And it's no coincidence that they're the other half of creator-owned heroes. But just like Steve Niles, Palmiotti and Gray haven't burned bridges anywhere, so they're able to work at a number of different publishers, and they bring a level of excellence with them wherever they go. Whether it's a Kickstarter campaign that starts off one way and becomes printed material later, or writing classic World War II characters for DC, or continuing the saga of Jonah Hex and All-Star Western. These guys are pros. They're two of the hardest working writers in comics. They're accessible to their fans. They're big proponents of the direct market. And I hate to keep harping on that, but there are creators that are kind of poo-pooing the direct market and trying to convince people to go another direction. But I'm always going to get behind and support creators that support us. And that's what Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray have done. And there's stuff that you may have never heard of that they've written. We've got a book over there, Retrovirus, as well as Trailblazer and The Tattered Man and other things that just, it seems like they have this never-ending well of story ideas, and they're all really, really good. So congratulations, guys, for making the list.
Final name on the list this year is Robert Kirkman. It's not really a surprise if you can see the giant display of Walking Dead stuff behind us or the stream of people coming in to buy Walking Dead stuff. Kirkman is really solid. I mean, there are a lot of writers that have achieved success not necessarily through strength of their work. There's some books that sell well, maybe based on an artist, or sell well because the character's popular. Kirkman's sold every book based on his own quality. The Walking Dead books are sort of unparalleled in what they've done, both to introduce new people to the industry. They've almost single-handedly saved Diamond Comics, as the word on the internet, and that a significant portion of their reorders for a long period were the Walking Dead books. And he's also not afraid to bring in new people. With his Skybound imprint, he's calling up new artists and writers, getting them to work, getting books out in the hands of publishers and into the hands of retailers and consumers in a way that they wouldn't have been able to do without his help. This year he brought us Thief of Thieves, which is sort of a weird conglomeration. Most creator-owned books, we have a creative writer or a creative artist writer who spearheads the book. But no, he's taken it, he's doing a story credit, he's kind of overseeing, producing it almost like Joss Whedon on the Buffy books and the Buffyverse. And he's getting A-list talent, well, strong B-list talent to write for it. And Robert Kirkman is sort of changing the way Image Comics does business. He's the only he's the only person on the Image board that's not an original founder, and he's just bringing it. He's a writer who knows business, and that's why he's on our list this year.
So there you have it, our top 10 list of comic book writers for 2012. Some of your favorites may not have been on it. Share those with us. Tell us.
Peter David.
Yeah.
JMS.
Yeah.
Mark Waid.
We could have done, Mark Waid doesn't like comic stores. We could have done a list of more than 10 easily. As I said at the beginning, it's just been a great year for comics, especially on the writing side. So that's our list. Let us know what you think, and thanks for watching.